batai zvakanaka situation yangu panyumbani pepe ZBC National FM ndawedzereka gopa na 8 kiloko.
Nauti chiverengwa na shingirirai hokoza.
A beautiful afternoon to you out here at the Hill in Pocket Hill, Highlands, Harare, the capital city. This is the Lunchtime News. We are live as well as streaming on our Facebook page. Your views and comments are always welcome. Do tell us where you are viewing from. I am Leanne.
The challenge with the majority of our institutions is that oftentimes they're captured. The challenge with most of our institutions is that oftentimes there's a conflation between the state, those institutions, and the political party.
The media space in Zimbabwe is very narrow. This is a country with only one television station. I mean, that's even a small town in most countries has more than one television station. And having an independent voice in television, in radio, there have not been any licensing of new radio stations, either community or national.
Media is an important component of community development. Media bridges communities. Media through broadcasting empowers and equips people, thereby effecting democracy. Democracy demands equal opportunities and everything is for the people, by the people. For democracy to thrive, a healthy and credible media space should exist where there is freedom of expression, assistance by the government, as well as respect of journalists and audience by disseminating of nothing but the truth. Plurality of voices in democracy is critical, and media houses should provide alternative voices so that every member of the community has something to pick.
Media is very important because that is why it is regarded as the fourth estate, meaning that apart from the executive and the judiciary, we are the fourth estate and you actually play a big role in the community. So obviously the media is very important.
Media is a key vehicle that is supposed to mediate conversations and stimulate discussions among members of the society and competing interests within society. So the role of media is that it is a public good that communicates verified information.
I can say the media is very important to the citizens in terms of its role of informing, entertaining, and educating, as it were.
According to Zimbabwe Media Alliance in their 2019 Press Day press statement, there are 4 pillars of media democracy that they want for this land's media liberty. 1. Promotion of freedom of expression. 2. Right to information. 3. Media freedom. 4. Media laws and policy reforms. They said these should be availed in order to have a better environment where journalists and media personalities operate freely without fear or favor. Post-elections have been marred with a lot of disgruntlements. Reforms have been the center of argument, and media reforms have been part of the contested reforms. The issue of ownership and control of the available sole broadcaster, ZBC, has resulted in a polarized media space, and politics has become the leading beat. That has necessitated a broken and disintegrated nation, where people are divided not on social stratification, but on tribal and ethnic lines. That has been a threat to the national security. Around 2000, the Daily News was bombed and anyone seen reading a copy of the Daily News was coined an opposition member. So was the same with the Herald subscriber. They were labeled ZANU PF supporters. That's how far politics have influenced our local media and shaped communities. Unfortunately, many lives were lost around the same era, and again, media has been part of the fights in both camps, the opposition and the ruling party.
The Minister of Information unleashed venom nightly on television, Professor Jonathan Moyo. On one occasion, he said the Daily News has gone too far. Something will have to be done about it. This was on TV on a Friday night. On Sunday night, the printing press of the Daily News was destroyed in a not so mysterious bomb explosion.
Part of the media reforms demands equal opportunity to the public broadcaster by all political players. Over the years, ZBC has been accused of siding with the ruling government ZANU PF. This has been necessitated by political economy of the media, which deals with issues of ownership. But this has been debatable, as there should be a thick wall between the government and the ruling party. Such thin and invisible line between government and the ruling party is pure testimony of abuse of power, bad governance, and unconstitutionalism. An old media adage which says, "He who pays the piper takes the tune," has precisely spoken about how the author's pen unfairly rotates when writing about the hand that feeds him. However, those accused have remained in denial of ever abusing the media space by tinting programming with propaganda. The political space has been accused of being the referee in issuance of broadcasting licenses. But how has politics interference impacted broadcasting in Zimbabwe? And how has politics affected dissemination of information to the public? The functions of the Ministry of Information, Publicity and Broadcasting Services include formulation and implementation of media laws and policies, information dissemination, promotion and marketing of the country's image, regulation of media space, as well as assisting both local and foreign journalists.
The Ministry of Information, Publicity and Broadcasting Services does the rebranding, especially of the Second Republic. Our job is actually to make sure that we inform people. And here we're talking about informing people about policies of government, programs of government, projects which are being done, and how they are being implemented. We get to reach everyone in the country. So this ministry does the rebranding, as I said, and our job is to bring people together. Because what is important is we have to have a Zimbabwe which has got unity. Because where there's unity and there's peace in Zimbabwe, certainly development will be there. So the job of this ministry is mostly that, to make sure that we inform, we educate, and we also entertain. That's why we work with artists, because it's very important. Music, drama, it brings people together. There is a spirit of solidarity in those things. So as a country, we need it to make sure that we move as a bloc.
As a Ministry of Information, Publicity and Broadcasting Services, we have so many functions, but one of the major functions is that we are here to disseminate information about government policies to the citizenry. And vice versa, we also have officers in the rural areas who also give information about activities in those areas so that government is able to formulate policies. The other issue is that we are here as a ministry to make sure that we clean up the image of the country, portray the positives about Zimbabwe, and we do this using the media. My minister is the government spokesman. So in everything what government does, which it wants to communicate with the generality of the public, it comes via the Ministry of Information. We also act as a conduit for other ministries as well, so that we can also speak on their behalf. And we also promote media diversity, pluralism, and also we assist journalists, outside journalists, with whatever they need. Is it accreditation, clearance, so that they can work in this country in an environment which is conducive to their work? We do that.
Having a thin, small and harsh playground, media has become a battleground for politicians. How and why is media important? to politicians?
I think it's very important because it influences public opinion, and politicians depend a lot on public opinion, because if public opinion shifts against you, it means your political fortunes can also change. So it's always to your advantage as a politician if the media gives you fair coverage and gives you good publicity.
It's a very important component of a politician's life. There is nothing that you can do in politics without wanting it to be broadcasted or to be publicized. So media plays a critical role in the life of a politician, because you also need to communicate your position, your views and opinions to the public, so that they know what you think, what you represent, and what programs you will be conducting in your political life. So media remains a critical component of a politician's life.
Media is very important to politicians because you have to be able to sell your ideology. People have to understand what you stand for, what you're doing, where you're going and where you're coming from.
Of course, the media is important to the politics of development. It is not every politics, that deserves the attention of the media. It is not every political discourses that requires the attention of the media, as it were. A genuine media and a responsible media focuses on politics that unites, politics that builds, politics that develop, and politics that makes our people feel better. So yes, it is important, but not every politics. Politics of development that unites, that builds, that develops, and most importantly, that makes our people better.
Media is important to everybody. That's why it's referred to as the fourth estate. Everyone, because you need to be informed, you need to be educated, and you need to be entertained. That's human nature. Everybody needs information. This is why you see everybody running around with their smartphones, because people love information. And truly so, information is power.
I think that the media plays a very important role because they disseminate information. They are responsible for ensuring that whatever is being communicated by people, politicians, and even non-politicians, that it gets to the people. So they should play this role in an impartial manner so that the dissemination of information is able to reach all and sundry without any bias. So I think that it is critical for the media to play this role in a professional manner.
Our local media situation has been a different playfield that has resulted in a lot of disgruntlements.
We don't have a scenario which is desirable. Firstly, there's a domination by the public broadcaster. And unfortunately, there's been some procrastination, there's been lack of goodwill, the lack of political will, as a result of which you don't have enough independent players. And also when you look at the issuing of licenses, you can see that there's some bias towards organizations which have got some connections with the ruling party.
The African Charter of Broadcasting talks about 3 types of broadcasting as part of the democratic inclusiveness. This then was the birth of commercial, community, and public service broadcasting. These 3 are supposed to complement each other in dissemination of information. Commercial, like the name, these are meant for commercial purposes, and commercial means profiting. They speak less about the people, and their core objective is to sell. Star FM is one type of such a station. Community. A community radio station does not have an agreed definition, but it is basically a group of people who come together for a mutual concern, thereby benefiting the community and bringing enhanced capital. It is a non-profitable radio with the intention to mirror the community activities and developments, and in the process inform, educate, and entertain. Community radio stations have 1. Limited broadcasting space. 2. Share views of the people in the same community as well as same ethnic group. 3. Voice of the voiceless. 4. Alternative voices for the marginalized. 5. Non-profitable. In Zimbabwe, we have a number of community radio stations, which includes Sky FM, Breeze FM, Airwaves FM, Nyami Nyami FM, Diamond FM, Ya, FM. The public service broadcaster refers to an information and educational tool accessible to all and meant for all. It is described as a meeting place where all citizens are welcome and considered. Public service broadcaster is financed and controlled by the public. Public service broadcaster should be 1. Accessible to all citizens throughout the country. 2. Should not try to optimize its ratings like commercial. 3. Must have diversity in programming in terms of genre and understandable to all citizens. 4. Should strive towards high program standards. 5. Broadcast to elevate public taste and facilitate nation-building efforts. 6. A platform where different views should be accepted and expressed freely and where information and criticism should circulate, among many other characteristics.
Public means the people of this country. So the role of that public broadcaster is to make sure that you are educating, entertaining with the right information, factual information, the right narrative. It's not about even something bad if it has happened. The national broadcaster still carries it as long as it's factual, as long as it educates our people and it makes our people understand what could have happened. And most importantly, the national broadcaster should always make Zimbabweans hopeful. They should be able to tell them what government is doing to make their lives better.
Public service simply means that you allow broadcasting to be a public good. What it means is that everyone can have a fair share towards this access of the public good. A public good, if you take an economics dimension, is that in one consuming it, it does not deprive the other to consume it. This is the same with ZBC. Firstly, you need to assess its reach. If it is going to be a public broadcaster, it must reach all the peoples of Zimbabwe. With the current reach of ZBC around 50%, shows that it has lost the footprint of public broadcasting. Secondly, it must have competitive content, that is high quality content, that allows for the development of downstream industries like content generation. Comparatively, look at South Africa with the rise of soap operas like Isidingo, Mfango, and so forth. They are being promoted by the public broadcaster because it is allowing for competitive rates so that they can continuously generate content. Then the other issue is that it must preserve local languages because of the north-south imbalance in terms of information flow. There is always a need to preserve the indigenous languages, and the best platform to do so is the public broadcaster because its mandate is mainly that. The other one, it should be run free of political interference. When you see it, you must see yourselves as citizens rather than political elites. That is the essence of a public broadcaster. It must be run independent of the political elites and report to parliament rather than to report to a parent ministry which has a vested interest of control.
A public broadcaster does not discriminate when they are broadcasting. A public broadcaster should be fair, should be balanced, should ensure that they report everything that is in the best interest of the public. But the moment they take a particular narrative, it ceases to be in the best interest of the public, but in the interest of that particular narrative and its supporters. So it is important for the public broadcaster to be independent and to ensure that they take up the role of objective reporting on the happenings of what is going on politically, economically, socially, etc., in the whole of Zimbabwe.
A public broadcaster should be independent. They should be independent because the purpose of information dissemination is to communicate the truth to the nation. It's very important. So we need independence of the broadcaster. That's the first thing. And so we need an independent broadcasting board. We need no interference from the state into broadcasting activities. We need citizens, since they are the main funding component of the public broadcaster. You know, it's funded from taxpayers' money. So the taxpayers should have a say into what is happening there. How do they have a say? By ensuring that ZBC is independent. and that they are not directed from the desk of a political party.
I think the public broadcaster must be accessible to everyone, and above all, I think it must take the lead role in informing the citizens about key issues, key developments.
In my view, the public broadcaster should actually serve the entire populace of Zimbabwe, irrespective of which political party or which political players are running the country.
A public broadcaster should be a national asset. It should be used to give as much as possible fair coverage to all the politicians, to all the political parties, especially elected members of parliament like me, because I'm no longer representing MDC Alliance. I'm representing the entire constituency of Hwange Central for 5 years.
The Zimbabwe Broadcasting Corporation, ZBC, is a state-controlled public service broadcaster in Zimbabwe. It was established as the Rhodesian Broadcasting Corporation, RBC, taking its current name in 1980. ZBC has become the center of broadcasting in Zimbabwe as we transit from Rhodesia Broadcasting Corporation. Like the RBC, ZBC has been accused of being a ZANU PF mouthpiece with no editorial independence.
The public broadcaster is a people's broadcasting. It's a vehicle. It must be a vehicle to push the national agenda, the national vision, the national priority. But as it stands right now, it is not communicating to the people, but they are sending poison, to the people, because they use it as a platform for campaign, a platform of sending their own manifesto, which is toxic to society.
Most of the reporting on our news on ZBC is all about ZANU PF. It's not as if Zimbabwe is all about a ZANU PF affair. They should balance their news, what is happening in the civic space, what is happening even with other political parties. When we watch news in South Africa, you get to see what ANC is doing, you see what DA is doing and other political parties. And if ZBC wants to restore its former glory and pride, it has to have balanced reporting and cease being ZANU PF broadcaster, as it now seems to be.
The public views ZBC as a political tool of ZANU PF, which it is. And it's so unfortunate. If they had broadened their broadcasting into entertainment, into a lot of other things, it would have been helpful. Do you know what? For your information, if there is breaking news in ZBC, they never show it until the 8 o'clock news. If there is breaking news, you rather watch it on South African televisions. It's crazy. Recently, when this gentleman was forced to resign, what's his name, the vice president, Kembo Mohadi, when they forced him to resign, that was breaking news on regional news outlets. That's why we watched it in real time. We only had to wait for the 8 o'clock news when the resignation was in the morning. It's crazy. But all that is normal to everybody who is behind ZBC. That's what makes me sick.
The national broadcaster has been killed by selfish individuals. They've destroyed the national resource. Because that institution, it must be the epitome, of disseminating information, encouraging development within societies, relaying correct information to the last person, those communities, downtrodden communities, a lot of people, it must be the center stage, of championing that. But it is failing. Why? It has been turned into a mouthpiece of another political party, a failed political party, an unrelatable political party.
ZBC has successfully managed to portray itself as an extension of the information department of the ruling party, instead of being a state broadcaster. While ZBC remains partisan, it remains a party broadcaster rather than a public service broadcaster.
Some people have deemed it the Zimbabwe or ZANU Broadcasting Corporation or Zimba Broadcasting Corporation during the era of Robert Mugabe. The reason being that you will find that there's domination, even the coverage by that broadcaster. If you look at the election period, you will find that 90 to 95% of the time is devoted to one political party.
If you just take the previous election reports from all the observer missions that were accredited in Zimbabwe, including SADC and AU, they all agree that ZBC was biased. To the extent of the bias of allocating up to 85% to 95% coverage to the ruling party, while the other political parties are scrambled for the balance. So it's a fact that has been documented successively by different forms of scientific documents to this end. That one then dents its attempts towards being a public, or that pretense towards being a public broadcaster, and remains what it is, a state broadcaster.
I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society in which all persons will live together in harmony with equal opportunities. It is an ideal which I hope to live for and to see realized. But my Lord, if needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die. The word democracy itself means rule by the people. Democracy is a system where people can change their rulers in a peaceful manner, and the government is given the right to rule because the people say it may. It is a situation where everything is for the people, by the people. Those accused have remained in denial of ever abusing the media space.
These are opposition political figures who are saying that, not people.
The mouthpiece of ZANU PF is just next door. Is the spokesperson of the party, and his name is Comrade S.K. Moyo. In his absence or out of his instruction, I can also be the small mouth of the party, and ZBC is not in any way near that, and there's no that responsibility. Those making those accusations are people that are bereft of any political oxygen. They've lost political oxygen, and they think theirs should be to complain, to attack, and irresponsibly so. I think that ZBC remains a national mouthpiece, and like I said earlier, it is doing that. ZANU PF mouthpiece next door, or myself if you want. And most importantly, the president. We do have several mouths as a party, and we do so. We thought necessarily they need to bother the ZBC, so that is as false as it sounds.
It's not true. It's not true. It's not true. It's a public, but as I said, they have their own editorial focus, which has nothing really to do with us. But don't forget, as a public broadcaster, the government of the day controls, rules.
Politicians around the world have been accused of failing to observe the difference between state and their ruling parties, thereby leading into conflation where the parties hijack government programs.
In most African states, it's conflated. In other jurisdictions, a state can be separate from a political party. What it simply means is that we now have fragile states and fragile political parties who, by their nature, a party captures the state and pushes its agenda as a party, rather than to strengthen the institutions of the state, so that a party assumes a state with strong institutions, strong guidelines, which are responsive to the people of that country, and it discharges the requirements of the different institutions that are within that state, rather than to use the state resources to further party agenda.
So Zimbabwe is one classic example right now in 2021 of a closed democracy. And one symptom of a closed democracy is where public institutions like ZBC are actually used directly to further the political agenda of the ruling party. So there is no difference right now in Zimbabwe. There's a clear conflation. In fact, there are 3 levels. There is ruling party, there is government, then there is state. And ZBC does not even see the difference. It operates at all levels at the same time.
From my understanding, we are a state broadcaster and we deal with the state. So the ruling party is the ruling party. They are the governing party. So you find out that as the state broadcaster, that's where we get most of our stories from. And if the other parties want to give us their stories, we are welcome to cover them.
where it's supposed to be blind, it rather conflates the ruling party's interests ahead of the national interest, because the national interest is permanent, while the political party interests are temporal, because they are birds of the passage. Politicians come in and go, but national interest remains forever. I would have opted for a situation whereby ZBC invests in understanding our diversity, our languages, our cultures, our different tastes in terms of thinking, religion, and so forth, and promote those ones rather than to be purveying the interests of a ruling party.
As the public broadcaster, what exactly is the editorial policy of ZBC?
Editorial policy of ZBC is that they should give, in other words, it should be balanced. Balanced in the sense that you give both sides of the story. That's the editorial policy of the ZBC. And also content-wise, to make sure that this content is educative, is entertaining, and so forth. So that is their editorial policy, balanced, factual.
But is that how ZBC is operating? Section 62, Part 1 of the Supreme Law of this beloved nation respects the right to access information. It respects the right to freedom of expression, which includes freedom to seek, receive, and communicate ideas and other information. A democratic space demands representation when someone's rights are infringed. A democratic community demands equal opportunities, and citizens are equal, be it in the eyes of the law, aid, politics, and information. According to the Constitution, the way the sole broadcaster ZBC is operating is infringing rights of some members of the community, as politics seems to be the core for broadcasting in Zimbabwe. Public broadcaster ZBC's prime objective is to serve the Zimbabwean population by provision of a convenient and reliable information hub that relates and engages the population of Zimbabwe. This means that if a television station is a public broadcaster, they must be the voice of the people and advocate for freedom of expression. ZBC started broadcasting mostly in 3 languages: English, Shona, and Ndebele. Harare Pockets and Mbare Studios accommodated both radio and television, while Montrose in Bulawayo adds in. In the print media, the Herald under Zim papers became the prime player, with sister papers Manika Post and Chronicles. The transition in demand for information created space for more papers and radio stations. Unfortunately, the television airspace has remained constricted, with ZTV being the sole broadcaster. There has been an outcry by the ordinary citizens as they accuse ZBC of misrepresenting facts, as well as not telling the truth. This has pushed multitudes to migrate to satellite channels, with DSTV and OpenView decoders taking over as they offer variety. These hubs offer both pluralism and diversity, and one has to pick and pay a station of his or her choice. Speaking to the public, there is well feel shortchanged by the public broadcaster, and accuses ZBC of being unbalanced, unfair, baseless, and boring.
Kwete andione ZBC.
Magma programs are most of them are no bore.
Let's say biased information, in the sense that they tell us what we want to hear, not the truth.
To my opinion, in ZBC, inobuditsa ma programs akanaka, but not 100%. Atinoda isusu sema viewers or my listeners. Says ZBC or state broadcast. Techingotarisirawo kuti vakati kune verimwe bato vanofana kuti zvavanotaurawo zviwikwewo handiti verimwe bato riri kutonga vakataurawo zvavo zviwikwewo zvinge zviri balance. Yes, zvinhu zvinofana kunge zviri balance. Tisange tichiti ZBC inge iri yechinhu 1 plus ndingati vange vachiedza kuti zvavanotaura zviri 100% truth, nekuti zvikava zvine kuwedzerera nekunyepa handitika zvikawedzerwa nekunyepa zvichaita kuti ma listeners paanonzwa nhau kana pamwe dziri serious anogona kungoti nonsense. Wozana anenge andikajairira mentality yekuti ezi kuti nini kana ndikazikandura nyaya yekunyepa handitika mumwe musi pandichataura kuti I need help
people just said amumuziye saka ipapo panoda kuti pagadziriswe.
ZBC does meet my expectations because they have improved in their programming and their programs are quite informing and enjoyable.
Ine maprogramu akawandisa inotipa nhoroondo yekuti nyika yedu yakabva kupi iri kuenda kupi zvii zvaitwa muhondo inotipa maprogramu ekuti zvinhu zviri kurimwa sei munyika medu tinorima sei agriculture yakamira sei upfumi hwenyika hwakamira sei huri kuenda nekupi zvese izvo tinozvidzidza paZT kubva paZTV.
Opposition parties over the years have cried foul over unfair reportage by the public broadcaster. They claim they are not getting an opportunity on public broadcasters at ZBC, as they say all the programming is dedicated only to ZANU PF. This has seen ZBC over the years losing relevance as people associate the state broadcaster with the ruling party ZANU PF. Citizens view ZBC as a vehicle for ZANU PF propaganda. ZANU PF has been accused of hoodwinking ordinary citizens by using media theories like agenda setting through the only public service broadcasters at ZBC. The objective of all these theories is to brainwash the audience into believing a set agenda. Media is so influential that it can change people's worldview. Around the 1930s, Adolf Hitler used media to encourage Germans into another disaster in the name of Second World War. He sets up a ministry that was responsible for inciting and encouraging people into fighting for their land. The minister by the name Joseph Goebbels was assigned as the Minister of Propaganda. That helped Hitler in achieving his goal, and to date that same strategy is used by the world leaders. With all these views from the ordinary citizens in the streets, is ZBC serving the interests of the funder with the public?
Yes, it's serving public interest.
I think in my view it depends with the side to which you belong as a citizen. If you are obviously on the side of those in power, your views will be represented. But if you are on the opposite side, your views won't be represented in a very positive manner.
Far from it, it's sad because ZBC, we as ZBC, the citizens of Zimbabwe, we sustain it through our licenses and fiscal support. Hence, it should reflect our diversity, our various tastes. It should reflect our different political thinking.
If you're a citizen and you have a view that is against the ruling party of the government, you will not be given good or fair coverage. So that's the reason why I don't watch ZBC. So it's clearly a ZANU PF broadcaster.
Yes, it is representing the citizens in that as a news reporter, as a news broadcaster, we actually go to the people, we go to the community, we find out the news, we get the news from them. So in a way, we are representing their views, we are telling their stories.
We have seen the media getting distorted to an extent that some media houses, even including ZBC at some point, I'll put it that way, they were tempted also to sideline or also operate as probably a conduit for only pro-government or pro-ZANU PF propaganda, and that at some point disappointed, probably, I'll put it that way, the listeners, to an extent that we still have these listeners who are not probably forthcoming or appreciative even of the current content, but following it recently, I think it has improved. It has improved, yeah.
Godfrey Tsenengam is a true testament of how the public broadcaster can shun away from those that are of a different opinion. Ever since he left ZANU PF, he became a rare character on ZBC TV. Did he stop participating in his activities that made him popular on ZTV? Or there are other reasons?
It's not like we have stopped participating in our usual activities, but I think it is because we have fallen out of favor with the authorities. So they no longer see it fit to give us that opportunity on the national broadcaster and all state-owned media outlets. So it is because they feel that we are no longer pushing that partisan agenda that we used to push when we were members of the party.
ZBC is accused of twisting and misrepresenting facts by other political players. As it stands in Zimbabwe, the public broadcaster is failing to operate as enshrined in both the African Charter and the supreme law of this land, which is the Constitution. But how should be the relationship between ZBC as the central institution of broadcasting, as well as other media houses with political players? And how has bad and negative publicity affected politicians?
The relationship should be cordial, respectful, and so on. But unfortunately, you don't have that. You know, in the past, some ZBC journalists have tried to interview me, talk to me about our political party or the 31st July movement. And what is striking is that at the end of such interviews, they would tell me, well done for the interview, Mr. Ngarivume. But as you know, this may not even come out after all. It's up to the editors to look at this and see if it is fit for their purpose.
2 years ago, I was appointed spokesperson for the MDC Alliance in June 2019. I actually went to meet the top management of the ZBC and the direct manager for news and current affairs. And I explained to him that as the spokesperson for the largest opposition party in the country, it was my wish that we had a good relationship with ZBC. And they, as journalists, expressed interest in improving relationships with our party. But that arrangement did not last, because as a journalist, the moment you try to give coverage to MDC Alliance, your own colleagues at work start to think that you are from the opposition party and you lose your job.
The ZBC has never been put in place to serve the interests of any political organization. If it had to do that, then that was going to be a very serious national challenge. The ZBC is a public broadcaster. The interest should be the public, not the interest of a political party, including ours. So we do not have complaints with the ZBC because, you know, let me just tell you something. ZANU PF is a symbiotic relationship with the masses of the people of Zimbabwe. We carry our people on our shoulders because they carry the part on their back. That is the relationship we have, and it dates back to the times of the prosecution of the liberation struggle. So, as a political organization, our focus is mobilization and recruitment of new members. And right now we have under what we call the B part of the 5 million campaign. And I think you know what it aims to do by its very nature. 5 million votes by 2023. And we're in the rural communities, we're in townships, we're in growth points, we're in villages, we're everywhere trying to mobilize for the party. That is what we do. That is what our interest is, to remain in power and service and work and develop the nation and its people under what is called servant leadership. So a political party, as it were, must not think that their fortunes lies with the ZBC. ZBC can do mobilization for you. It can't do voter mobilization for you. It's your duty to do that. And that is what we do. So complaining to ZBC whether they cover us, whether they don't, that is neither here nor there. It doesn't stop ZANU PF from winning elections. Okay? Yeah, so those who are saying the ZBC is not serving their interests must know that they are a threat to media freedom and press freedom if at least they were allowed to lay their hands for a few minutes on the throne, which of course can never happen.
There are some political parties apart from the ruling party which are very much receptive to ZBC. They actually invite us. Like at some point I actually wanted to interview Douglas Monzora. He was very receptive. I actually set up an interview with him. It was in line with the vaccination program, the health issues. He actually very receptive. And then I tried to get hold of the other MDC, the Chamisa-led MDC spokesperson. She wasn't welcoming, she wasn't receptive. So to those who actually want to work with ZBC, we are very accommodative and we work with them well.
They come to present a false picture of a broadcaster that is interested and that knows what they're supposed to do. And then at the end of the day, they've got political paymasters who they must please. And so if your message is not pro-establishment, then it's edited in such a way that it is not the message that you wanted to relay.
Well, with the state-owned media, I think there is a challenge. But with private media, I don't see any issues between myself and them. As for the state-owned media, I think it is informed by what politicians in the ruling party see as fit for their broadcasting policies or editorial stance.
Having such grey areas in the media space should be addressed by sticking to the constitutional demands of this nation, as well as a sound legislative framework. But who should determine the editorial policy of the public broadcaster?
Professionals should do that. The purpose really of, you have a ZBC board that regulates the running of the broadcaster. That is okay, as long as it is independent. And then the public then should employ competent people who exercise their minds independently onto the editorial of the broadcaster.
Over the years, there's been a tussle between the government and civic organizations over the issues of media freedom and freedom of expression, as the government has been accused of detecting and calling shots to the public broadcaster, as well as being unconstitutional.
MISA is a pressure group, part of 10 institutions that are in Southern Africa, which is a regional network. Zimbabwe is one of them, mainly to defend and promote freedom of expression in Southern Africa and advance the communicative rights that are accompanied with the same.
ZUJ is a labor union for journalists. It represents the labor interest of journalists. It talks about, it represents issues of, say, harassment against journalists, issues of sexual harassment against journalists, issues of remuneration for journalists, issues of fair working conditions for journalists.
ZANU PF has its own department responsible for dissemination of information, which has been in existence for some time now. Despite having a functioning organ responsible for party information dissemination, why do they keep abusing the public service broadcaster, ZBC? Is this constitutional, and is this not abuse of power? Are they ready to implement media reforms which demands equal opportunities to the public service broadcaster? And if so, why is this taking long? Do they agree that politics is at the center of broadcasting in Zimbabwe? And do they see how that is affecting innocent citizens who are apolitical?
The media reforms that have been put so far are exactly the optimum reforms that must be addressed in a sober community. And I'm happy with them. Journalists are now capable of doing their work without undue interference, with their security guaranteed. No those unbridled arrests that used to take place, particularly in the old republic, okay, and also during the colonial era. We don't see those things happening now, and we are proud about them.
The freedom of our journalists to speak out, tell it as it is. As we speak right now, you would realize that we still have these distortions where certain media houses are able to say that yes, there is freedom of speech, but certainly freedom after speech is not guaranteed.
I think as parliamentarians we have actually debated motions around media reform, including enacting the Broadcasting Services Act and several amendments. And in all instances, the opposition parliamentarians have been demanding for more space, and the ruling party have demanded and won in terms of maintaining the status quo, where we have the public broadcaster being reduced into a political party extension like where ZBC is today. Everything that ZBC does is in the interest of ZANU PF.
We don't provide media consultants here at ZANU PF. So if other media are finding it difficult to compete with other media houses for space, then that's their own funeral. They cannot then, label that on ZANU PF. We, or even in government as it were, we don't provide consulting services. You might also be aware that 6 television stations were just licensed last year by the responsible ministry. Okay, that's a plus. To add some more competition on ZBC. What else do you want? Community radio stations have been put in place. Yeah? Both private and those owned by the public, just like the same on TV, both public and private. They have been added on to the national airwaves. But then it is one thing to get a license, it is another thing to operate. And when the cost of operating is very expensive. If you can't, win it, then that remains your own funeral. You can't then label that on ZANU PF to say the media space favors others. How does ZANU PF? We don't train journalists here. You are the journalists. Eh? If you choose to go and work for ZBC, because it is the most prestigious institution of the media and the flagship of the cell, then that's up to you. Those who are competing with it must also build institutions that can compete with ZBC. But it is not a problem that ZBC is the flagship. It is not a problem that Zim Papers is the flagship. Yeah? But also some like Daily News, they are coming on the fray. They are doing well. We have not heard them complaining. Those complaining must put their house in order, isn't it? Yes.
Politicians and politics have become the central narrative in Zimbabwean media, and this had its own implications on Zimbabwean audience.
The public has been so shortchanged because it has been robbed of a dense type of marketplace of ideas. Because the more ideas compete, the more we are informed. But if you have monologues, you make half-truths the whole truth, which is a danger. And the cost of ignorance is highly pronounced in developing countries because it's difficult to undo ignorance that has been sustained through endorsements, especially from such conventional traditional means of communication.
The fact that they still do not give me opportunity to appear on that television or to interview me is disadvantaging not just my constituents but also the country. I was once invited to be a guest on a program on ZBC called Constituency Talk about 2 years ago, and at the last minute it was cancelled. And what I've noticed is that the program continues, but most of the time it shows members from ZANU PF, and it rarely shows members from my political party.
Those at Pockets Hill and the ministry responsible deny these allegations. But if it is not politics determining what should be viewed or broadcasted on state media, ZBC, how do the news team determine stories that make the 8 o'clock news bulletin and other programs?
The programs that we suggest, you are a producer, you suggest what you want to do, and you do your episodes. I'm a news reporter. I suggest the stories that I need to do, and do exactly that.
The bias part, I don't agree that we're biased. We're not biased. We're not biased. If you engage us, we're game.
ZBC mustn't belong to one political party because it's a public broadcaster, which means it belongs to the citizens that pay taxes. So it is very wrong for them to do a bidding for ZANU PF, as if ZANU PF is the only political party in Zimbabwe. You know, as if there is anything natural about being ZANU PF. You know. So there is nothing special at all about ZANU PF or about the president. There is nothing special, about the first lady. We are all citizens.
They broadcast live, the ZANU PF Congress, everything about ZANU PF is broadcasted live. But when did you ever see a single political party's Congress being broadcast? No, they never do that. So that independence becomes very critical, that the independence of the media, the independence of the broadcaster, of the public broadcaster, become the first and foremost important thing that we have to achieve.
Having worked with journalists since 1995 as a student leader at the University of Zimbabwe, I learned it from the start when I was in SRC that the journalist can be professional, but the employer can be different. So a journalist who works for a newspaper or a broadcaster which is private will behave differently to that of ZBC because of the editorial line of ZBC. So once they leave ZBC, they become more professional. Once they join ZBC, they become less professional because of the political influence of the ruling party on ZBC.
As the public broadcaster, ZBC must be a voice for the people, and everyone must have freedom of expression. As much as ZBC should remain apolitical, sadly that has not been the situation. Some of the sole broadcaster employees have become active members of the ruling party ZANU PF, as they have contested for political offices on ZANU PF tickets. Some have been successful to enter into mainstream politics, the likes of the late Alam Mpofu, Dingimuzi Puti, Superman Duanzira, Makosi Nhlongwane, among others. Surprisingly, Those that have double played as journalists and politicians, despite having breached the demands and regulations of public broadcasting service, have remained employed at ZBC, and that has been affecting the narrative from ZBC due to political lenses reportage, as those journalists who keep supporting their political part of choice, despite working at a public broadcaster, which should be apolitical.
They are free to do whatever they do. As a ministry, we provide them with policy guidance. We give policy guidance to the board, ZBC board. Then it is now the ZBC board which formulates their own policy to make sure that they run ZBC in a professional manner. So we no longer interfere. We don't interfere. Especially this, my minister and myself, we don't interfere. But we give them policy guidelines to follow.
Do those practicing journalism in Zimbabwe enjoy this constitutional right, and how does politics direct them in framing their stories?
In Zimbabwe, there's been a trend that those that speak against those that are in power, even if it's not criminal, they tend to see themselves in jail. You find people that are exposing corruption are the ones that you find themselves in jail. But those that are corrupt themselves, you will find them enjoying. They will simply go for a night. After that, you see them enjoying the next day, right? So in practice, these laws are not being followed, to the latter. In practice, those that are in positions of power are taking advantage of our ignorance, are taking advantage of the fact that the people of Zimbabwe have not wanted to test their constitution, as I said, including journalists, by the way. Journalists will tend to self-censor and they will tend not to write the truth, yet the constitution guarantees them. And at the end of the day, it's because they know that there is indeed freedom of speech, but there is no freedom of speech.
What exactly is expected from a good journalist who is conducting his or her duties?
For me, a good journalist should ensure that they thoroughly research on a story before publishing it.
I would appreciate a journalist who are guided by their ethics, who are not easily moved, who don't probably get hijacked or even swim into the agenda of the source.
A good journalist should abide with the foundations of journalism, that is truth-telling, balanced story, accuracy, and all other ethical provisions. That's the best defense line.
How has politics affected formulation of media laws that govern broadcasting in Zimbabwe? And are the citizens part of the consulted forum when laws are enacted as expected in a democratic setup?
The law is sponsored by a parent ministry. When the lawmaking process starts with the sponsorship of the parent ministry, but in unusual circumstances, which is yet to be done in Zimbabwe, a parliamentarian can sponsor a public interest bill. But given the nature of our parliament and the whipping system, it rarely sees the day of light. So it must come sponsored by the ministry, which is interested in the law, gazette it. When it is gazetted, it goes to parliament. When it is in parliament, it must go through the public consultative process, where the public contributes through feedback. Once it's done, it comes for the reading in the committees. Once the committees are satisfied, the lower house, it goes to the upper house. And once the upper house is done, the president assents.
Laws are not made by politicians or only. Politicians are those that they're in parliament. They've been elected to represent the people. So in actual fact, people come up with the laws. The members of parliament will then take what the people say and then debate it in parliament and put it into a law.
Politicians make up the executive of this country. Politicians make up the legislative arm of this country. And the legislative arm is the one that is responsible for enactment of laws.
Zimbabwean media decisions emerge from their political realities to the extent that the levels of polarization in the media reflect the divisions within the polity of the day. And it's not starting now. I think if you then take the picture of ZBC, formerly Rhodesia Broadcasting, it has been dancing out of tune comparing to different changes in the environments. And what it has done is to show that it is captured by a political party. So if the Rhodesian government was in office, it's saying Uklan and Singa, the Rhodesian policies. Same with government, which has gone through numerous stages of flip-flopping in policy, and ZBC's behavior has been aligned. The same with the issues to do with the media structures. They followed the political lines of the country as default lines of editorial policy.
Obviously, politics decides because if you know, in Zimbabwe, we've got what we call a monopolistic state or public broadcaster. So the only Zimbabwean television channel is ZBC. So recently some licenses were awarded, but for most of these 41 years of independence, ZBC has been the most dominant. And that is related to the Broadcasting Services Act and other kind of laws related to media. So those laws are formulated by a parliament that is heavily dominated by ZANU PF.
You know, media laws or legislation regulating the conduct of media and media practice is, of course, passed through parliament. And parliament is a political organization. It is a legislature of political representatives, both opposition and the ruling party. Of course, on our party we are proud we have the majority, 2/3 majority. So, as politics influences the regulations and the practice of media.
Despite having a constricted media space for new players, the past years have seen stiff laws being imposed which have been described as power accusation strategies by those in power. Repealed POS and IPA have been viewed as hegemon tools used by those in power, and they have been in contradiction with the demands of the supreme law of this nation, which is the Constitution. The recent bill being debated in Parliament, the Patriotic Bill, has also been described as the last nail in closure of alternative, divergent voices, which is expected in a democratic setup. However, the repealed laws, as well as those to be implemented, have received mixed reaction from both media practitioners as well as politicians.
Is it where if you look down memory line into history, you will understand how, some retrogressive, of course, legal instruments were used to muzzle media. And here I'm talking about Jonathan Moyo's sponsored Public Order and Security Act and Access to Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Those laws affected, the work of journalists. But we are pretty happy, of course, in the new dispensation that, the president has talked about reforms, including media reforms, legal reforms, political reforms in general. And among those political reforms is to deepen and entrench the right to freedom of expression, freedom of conscience, and most importantly, the freedom of the media. And that is why, journalists are free, and you are as free as you appear in this office. It was really something very much highly unthinkable some decades ago, when people like Jonathan Moyo was 2 ministers of information. You know what happened to journalists then? Most of them were harassed, arrested, and so forth. But we are happy we are in the new. And the new dispensation, of course, really means that, and that is why the media practitioners are as free as they should be in a democracy.
I want you to know that the President, Comrade E.D. Mnangagwa, is very much about diversity. He entertains diversity, opening up of airwaves, and making sure that Zimbabweans, as educated as we are, we should be able to air our views. We should be able to put our views on the table, each and every one. What helps this country is when Zimbabweans all come on board to put input so that we succeed in what we're doing.
IPA is no longer a law. It was repealed in 2020, in January 2020. It is being replaced. Firstly, it was replaced by the Freedom of Information Act. Then there was the Zimbabwe Media Communication Act in April this year. There's still a leg on privacy and data protection, which is supposed to complete the repeal of IPA in terms of the legs that it stands on. Remember, IPA stood on 3 legs. The one which regulated access, the other one which regulated the practice of journalists, and the other one on privacy. So as we stand, 2 of those ones are now acts, and we are now waiting for the finalization of the remaining components. POSA is no longer law. It was replaced by MOPA. So all these laws have got an implication on how people express, how they relate to each other, and how they enjoy their rights as provided for in the Universal Declaration of Rights. And for these laws to be in sync with the Constitution, there must be a continuous process of assessing how they are in sync with the new constitutional order. Where there are still contradictions, there's also need to attend to the judiciary arm to strike them off.
Those laws are definitely political in nature. They are meant to reduce alternative voices or dissenting voices. So they are specifically designed to make the media less accessible for those who are against the ruling party or against the government. So those laws are not good for the media in Zimbabwe.
It's actually window dressing, because people have been hoodwinked into believing that we've got a new dispensation, that we've got a second republic. But as far as I am concerned, it's simply a continuation of the old order. There's been no difference in my view. In fact, it could have actually been worse. What is then happened is that it's now what I can call a new deception. And the intention is to deceive the world into believing that there is going to be some reform. In fact, there is really no reform, and it's really more of a change of terminology. For example, when you look at the Public Order and Security Act and the MOPA, you will find that it's actually a distinction without a difference. Most of the repressive legislation is still there. When you look at the cyber crime bill, the intention really is to pry into the private affairs of citizens. And in that regard, there is no intention whatsoever to liberalize the situation, but rather simply a continuation of the old order.
Media is a profession that can self-regulate, and the issue of self-regulation is key in as far as it ensures that the media itself is independent and fair. So you will see that all of the complaints that we're giving in terms of the control of the public media and the like, it emanates from that aspect of those legislation.
I supported the repealing of IPA and the other repressive statutes that we had. And I'm not in full support of MOPA. There are some sections that I don't subscribe to. But in any act or policy that is put in place, you will never fully subscribe to everything that will be in it.
Would have hoped that they are designed with the hope of promoting the expansion of the industry and the use of the spectrum by many rather than few.
Official Secret Act and the introduction of Broadcasting Association of Zimbabwe (BAZ) and the Zimbabwe Media Commission (ZMC) have been part of hegemony enabling tools according to members of the media society.
Under the current environment, it's going to be difficult, and I think you have to look at it in two contexts. Firstly, the provisions themselves, and then more importantly, the lack of political will. I think that when you look at the provisions of the Constitution, they envisage a situation where the appointment of the chair of the ZMC, for example, is done in consultation with the Committee on Standing Rules and Orders. After consultation, rather. And after consultation really means that the President is not obliged to follow the advice of the committee. But be that as it may, if you have got a President who has got the relevant political will to ensure that things in Zimbabwe are done in an open and transparent manner, you will find that in terms of the appointments, that person would then look for people who are competent, people who are professional. So I believe that apart from the constitutional constraints, it is more a result of the lack of political will, the lack of good faith. There is actually bad faith in that regard. And again, I've already alluded to the uneven electoral playing field, which then results in an election outcome which is not reflective of the will of the people of Zimbabwe. If you have got a situation where the legislature is a reflection of the political will or the choice of the electorate, then I think you then have more diversity. And if you've got those checks and balances, at present you don't have checks and balances because of the domination by one political party in both the executive and the legislature, as a result of which the Committee on Standing Rules and Orders is dominated by preponderance of members from one political party.
Speaking to the responsible authorities, politicians, activists, journalists, academia, as well as citizens, they've suggested recommendations to the government as well as the public broadcaster to rebrand into pure broadcasting free from politics and politicians.
They have to balance their reporting, they have to balance their news coverage and ensure that they sell the good Zimbabwean story, not in a partisan manner, but to also incorporate all other progressive political parties who want the best for Zimbabwe, and to also report about general things that are happening in different places in Zimbabwe, rather than having a whole 1 hour of news reporting on what ZANU PF has been doing. I think that is totally wrong.
It's disheartening to note that we are far much behind in terms of freedom of the media and the quality of services that we get from the broadcasting institutions so currently available compared to even our neighbors in South Africa. They've planned of TV stations, planned of radio stations. There is a lot of freedom in terms of reporting.
Broadcasting in Zimbabwe has come a long way. And Zimbabwe itself is evident that the past 40 years we have been barren in terms of development of the industry. Only the few years have we seen the sprouting of new voices in the sector. After having gone that long, we still fail to meet the yardstick of independence in the industry. And still see that it's the ruling elites that are consolidating ownership rather than opening it up to the key beneficiaries, the people of Zimbabwe. So in essence, what we are saying is there is need to open it up because broadcasting is capital intense. It requires investment, not only from within, but from afar and from wide sources, so that it grows and leapfrog by capturing new technology, by capturing new skills, and by so doing, it allows the people of Zimbabwe not to be treated like second in terms of existence to other people of other nations.
The management of ZBC, working with the board and working with the staff, they are supposed to initiate the process and then consult with stakeholders. Various stakeholders who are interested in the public broadcaster, whether they are civil society, whether they are politicians, traditional leaders, community leaders, captains of industry, everyone who has got a firm interest in the public broadcaster. So they have to do public consultations.
Well, we expect them to update us on daily news, like from the world over and around Africa, and what's happening to us, like in everyday situations.
It's all about professionalism. What we want is professionalism. You know, it's not about reporting about MDC only. It's about being professional. That's what we want. You know, being non-partisan. You know, everything must be reported. People must know, because what is the role of a broadcasting authority, a broadcasting service? It's communication. Communicating what? Communicating national issues, communicating local issues.
I believe that it is imperative to ensure that their signal is going to be accessed by all the people in all the four corners of the country. Then, more importantly, it is critical to ensure that in terms of its operations, it adopts the position where it serves the interests of the people of Zimbabwe in their generality and not the partisan interests of a political party.
Vanofana kubalansisa side entertainment kana ari makatuni ngavese makatuni akabalansa nedrama o news dzavo macurrent affairs zvakangosangana, not kuti vanoita one-sided kuti vanowanza issue.
The law calls for ZBC to respect the people of Zimbabwe by ensuring that they are reflected within its programming and they are reached by their signal at any given time. So ZBC should just live to its mandate. The mandate of serving the public is clear, and it requires it to retain its integrity. The integrity comes in its fairness in coverage, its ability to go beyond narrow political lenses, its ability to be diverse in representation, its ability to procure high quality content, the ability to preserve our local languages and indigenous languages, the abilities to also contribute to the content generation industry, as I have alluded to earlier on. But above that, for the board to be insulated from pressures of political capture.
Number one, my recommendation to the government is that there needs to transform ZBC into a genuine public broadcaster to ensure that ZBC services the public rather than the state and rather than ZANU PF. It should be transformed into a genuine, true public broadcaster. Number two, I would recommend that through the Broadcasting Authority of Zimbabwe, the government should license more radio stations and more TV stations for the creation of employment for young people, and also for the not only plurality but diversity of the media, because we may have a number of media houses and not have diverse voices. Many media, one voice. So you find that we need many media by different owners, so that there can be competition, so that there can be employment, so that there can be diversity of views.
It is free from political interference as it exists, so there is no further recommendation about that, except to say, continue, you are on the right path.
There's an old adage which says you can't fix a hole in a shit without making other smaller holes. This documentary, as much as it might open up past and present wounds, the central objective is to provoke the audience, responsible authorities, and above all the government to effect pure broadcasting which benefits not a single group but all as democracy demands. It is the hope of the producers of this documentary that the views expressed in this film will be considered and effect changes in the media space of this country. We need our media to tell the Zimbabwean story without dividing people by using politics and political factions. In the past recent years, most media houses have been occupied by activists rather than media personalities. Our media is diverted from the core objective of speaking the Zimbabwean story. And that has not just been an abuse of the recipient, but it has also necessitated divisions among citizens.
Black men really never meant a thing during the colonial regime. Their issues, their values, their ethics, their aspirations, they were all suppressed at the level of the media. The herald that you have today existed during the Smith regime, the colonial regime. And you know that then its purpose was to suppress nationalism, to suppress, black freedom, to suppress, and spread propaganda against the black people, to justify racial segregation, to justify, racial suppression of the black people, to justify suppression of black people, and most importantly, to justify, unbridled expropriation of their resources. And certainly, it was quite really something very bad and something that we really had to reflect on the Independence Day. We reflect on those things. How, our people were suppressed by the media. How the media was used as a sword to muzzle the hearts of our people. It was quite unfortunate. But compared to now, as we celebrate the 41st anniversary of our independence, we look back, we reflect on those issues, we say yes, we now have a responsible media, that which is supposed to tell the world that what happened in Chimoyo was a massacre and something that was nearly closer to a genocide against innocent black people.
At 41 years, we have really done badly as a country. Most of the gains that we had in 1980 have been lost, whether it's health, whether it's education, whether it's housing, whether it's infrastructure. Anything related to Zimbabwe has been on a negative trend. I'm sad to tell you that the more things change, the more they remain the same. There is no difference between the Smith era and the ED era. They are just the same. It's like ED has been inspired by the Rhodesians. So 41 years after independence, public broadcasting in Zimbabwe is an absolute disgrace. I'm very disappointed at the lack of progress. We need 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different television channels.
The public is still obliged to accurate, truthful and fair news by the public service broadcaster, as they are the central reason for this setup and also they are the taxpayers. Resorting to other forms of information hubs, be it social media or pirate broadcasters, is an impedance of the democratic principle enshrined in African Charter. Citizens have a right to accurate information, and it is the duty of the government to make such provisions. As we move into a new era with a new administration, we wait to see if the latter, the new dispensation, will not proceed with the already contested unfair practices.